The first of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. A person is said to be living in extreme poverty if they subsist on less than $1.25 a day. The global community has set itself the target of eradicating this form of poverty completely once the SDGs are due in 2030. But because different countries enjoy different standards of living, the definition of poverty varies from country to country. This so-called relative poverty is measured according to the economic well-being of a country, and SDG 1 also aims at cutting the proportion of people living in relative poverty at least in half. To reduce poverty on a global scale, countries need to put into place specific systems that allow them to tackle the problems of poverty more efficiently. Especially important are so-called nationally appropriate social protection systems. These are social systems that can care for the most vulnerable and poor people and ensure that everyone, all men and women, regardless of wealth or privilege, must have equal rights and access to the most basic commodities of society. This includes economic resources and basic services such as shelter, food, healthcare, education, transport, information, to mean access to libraries and the internet, as well as a variety of public services like policing and firefighting. In order to achieve these goals, we must ensure the mobilization of resources. By some estimates, the global community would need to spend over $175 billion a year to achieve this goal, and governments worldwide are required to cooperate so that developing countries receive enough resources to be able to develop the necessary programs. Resources are not everything, though. They must come with an adequate policy framework that will provide a solid and sustainable backbone upon which to build social protection systems. The global community has long been committed to fighting poverty. In 1990, over 35% of the world population lived in extreme poverty. But in 2015, that proportion had shrunk to just 10%. Unfortunately, the rate of poverty reduction has slowed in current years. Estimates today show that around 8% of the global population lives in extreme poverty, down only 2% in the past 5 years. There are several roadblocks that must be overcome in the quest to eradicate poverty. Fragile and conflict-ridden areas are less likely to meet the goals, lacking the stability needed for widespread social programs. Economic shocks and the effects of climate change also hinder progress. But these setbacks do not affect every nation equally. The data shows that there is a big difference in progress between regions. East Asia and Europe are both very well on track to meet the goals set by 2030, but Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, is far behind meeting the targets. Because of that, it is especially important to cooperate on a global scale and support countries that struggle the most with reaching their goals. This means that the global community, and especially more developed nations, need to provide financial support to developing countries which are further away from meeting their targets. Only through international cooperation can we make sure to reach SDG 1 by 2030 and eradicate poverty on a global scale.